As you can see, I have two last names up there, R-U-E-B and Castillejo. And so I have a kind of a funny story about this. My last name on Instagram and some of my social media is Castillejo, and then on Facebook it's Reeb. I'm all the same person, don't worry. What happened is, when we got married, my husband's a naturalized Mexican citizen. And when we got married, the judge filled out the paperwork that we were going to send to the INS as R-U-E-B. So all of the paperwork went through the INS as my maiden last name, and so therefore I couldn't change any of my legal documentation to Castillejo when we first got married. We've been married 17 years. So in that process, we bought a house, we had kids, there were birth certificates, and when he became a citizen 10 years ago, finally I could change my name, and then I was just like, I'm tired. I'm tired. But I do own his last name proudly. He's my best friend, so I just wanted to clear that up. I'm currently studying for my master's degree in counseling and psychology, and I focus a lot of my research on trauma, family trauma, racial trauma, and how it touches my life and how it touches all of our lives, really. And so, as you heard, I have 4 kids, and I'm trying not to harm them or damage them in the process, and I'm gone a lot. Yeah, that's Benjamin, this is Estella, Luca, and Julie. And so one of the things I'm trying to do to manage my schedule and kids is I take my kids out once every couple of weeks, one at a time, and spend some time with them. So Ben was like, it's my turn, Mom, it's my turn. I'm like, yes, we're going tomorrow. What do you want to do? I want to get a chocolate muffin. So I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. Let's go get a chocolate muffin. I know just the place. We have this coffee shop because, I'm from the Seattle area. We've got to have our coffee just right. And actually, I saw the iced tea, the sweet tea, and I was like, what is that? I don't know for sure. So I have the variety of coffees, right? So Ben and I are going, we head out, we get there, and I'm proud. I got my 8-year-old son. I'm congratulating myself. I did it, I'm here. And I know the barista, and I say to her, hey, Ben and I are on a date. And Ben goes, Mom, shh. I'm like, okay. So we order our food, we sit down, and because I'm trying to be a good mom and a good therapist, I look at him and I say, hey Ben, I'm really curious, what's wrong? He's like, you said the word date. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He's like, well, we're not gonna be doing any yucky kissing. I'm like, that's right. And he's like, don't you know child marriage is illegal, Mom? I'm like, oh yeah, you got me. So I stand corrected. So the first thing I'm trying not to do is hurt my own family. He has picked up on the work I'm doing in South Seattle. I work as a survivor engagement specialist, and I work with women and men and all genders who are trying to exit the sex trade. And so he does understand some of that. Thank you for having me here. It's a joy to be in Austin. I was kind of hoping for some of that hot sun I saw last week, but I see I brought some of the clouds with me, but that's okay. Look, I'm here to talk about Hagar and why is she brave. And that brings up a lot for me. Hagar, when we talk about her, we're talking about gender, ethnicity, beauty, slavery, abandonment, patriarchy, systems of oppression. We're talking about trauma. And if you haven't been engaged with social media or the news, these things are on all of our minds. We're living them in our bodies. And I didn't want to talk about Hagar, actually. I wrote a book about her, journaled about her for a long time. And then when I came to decide to speak about her, I had so much internal resistance. And I realized that I didn't like Hagar because she reminded me of myself. And just that feeling of hopelessness and powerlessness, and I didn't know what to do about it. Trauma is suffering. It's something that doesn't go away. It's dying, and then you find out, oh wait, I'm still breathing. I'm still here. And then you're still living that next day. And it's the death. We feel it in our cells. It lives in our bodies. It's in our DNA. We get it from our parents and our grandparents, and we pass it on to our own children. Trauma lives in the particularity of our stories. And how do we heal from that? I mean, let it sink in for a minute. Like, if we understand the gravity of what we carry, like, how do we heal from that? Well, we heal from that by being witnessed, by being known, by being seen. And Hagar leads us into this bravely. And then Jesus builds on that later. He not only, like, died on the cross, but he allowed himself to be seen. Before he died, and after he died, when he came back with scars. He didn't come back with new baby skin. He came back with his scars. So we must witness the particularity of Jesus' suffering to uncover the particularities of our wounds so we can know our brokenness and beauty. And Hagar opens this door. Hey, here's the truth. We appreciate brave overcomers, right? Social media posts, happy, high, all of that. The silent sufferers and the people who have it all together. But I'm going to propose that that's actually a quick door to death, that denial is not a pathway to life. I've grown up telling myself, oh yeah, I can do it, I'm going to be okay. I had played basketball at the university, I had a piano scholarship, and lived this combined identity of my mom was Mexican, my dad was German. So my mom was like, I remember growing up and hearing like, your mom is too emotional. What's wrong with her? Tell her not to cry. And then I remember my dad, like he's the stoic German man, like he has it all together, he's organized. And then I was the kid. And I love my mom and I love my dad, and how am I supposed to be? Like, who am I? Do I belong? Do I fit in? So deep breaths, everyone. Hagar isn't the traditional person we talk about at Sunday school. And her descendants are often thought about as antagonizers. And I don't know about this, but I think that if we understand who Hagar is and the legacy she came from, we can understand that she belonged. And she belongs in the story. And we belong. Hagar was created to belong. In Genesis, when Eve was created, it was just man first. And actually, the Hebrew talks about him as an earth creature. He wasn't a male, he was an earth creature. When Eve was created, the typical translation calls her a helper. What does that mean, helper? I mean, I think of it as like subordinate, like the servant, but the word in Hebrew is actually E-Z-E-R, Ezer, and it's two parts, E-Z and E-R. And these two parts mean actually ally, protector, defender, and to rescue, to save. I'm like, what? So Eve is actually the ally, protector, defender, the savior of Adam. Hello, like, that's truth right there. And not only that, like 21 times this word Ezer is used in the Old Testament, and who does it refer to? It refers to God as Ezer to the Israelites. I'm like, that's some serious backup for the Israelites. That's not a position of like, oh, you're less than, like, do whatever I tell you to do. So let's step into who we are created to be. And we are created to belong. So if we think about that, and we come back to Hagar, she was trapped in the system that gave her a certain value, that told her who she was. Her fate wasn't under her control. She didn't have control of her body when she was with Pharaoh, and she obviously didn't have control of it when he said, hey, Sarai, take Hagar with you. You guys go. The story of Hagar is set against a promise made to Abram in Genesis 12. I will make you into a great nation. And we tell this story. Abram did bravely leave to follow God and follow him. His faith moved him, and his fear overcame him. I cannot dismiss the harm he perpetrated against his wife when he gave Sarai 2 times to foreign leaders, marketing his sister's beauty to save himself. And so how do we hold that? Abraham is perpetrator? What? And Abraham is faithful one. And then we look at Sarai. Sarai and Hagar both lose their rights to their bodies, and trauma reenacts itself in our stories. Often the victims become the perpetrators when trapped in systems of patriarchy and oppression. Sarah aligned with Abram when the promise of an heir felt impossible. She aligned with Abram because he was powerful. And sit with that for a moment, because I'm not sitting here judging Sarah either. Because when we're in systems and when we're in this process that our culture tells us we're in, often we, to survive, to to get out of the trauma, we have to align ourselves with something that's going to save us. And she didn't know what that was. Abram's power allowed him to perpetrate abuse both to his wife and his servant. And he came out of it with 2 sons, not just one, and 2 inheritances. And so I love talking about this, and I hate talking about this, because often we think our lives are too complicated for the Bible. There's so much complexity in our lives. Like we got race going on, we got culture going on, we got politics going on, we got mass shootings, we got terrorist acts, hate on all sides, hate of differences on all sides, and we have perpetrators in the church, and we have perpetrators outside of the church, and yet some people that say racist comments are also doing good things, and it's like, how do we hold all of that? And actually, you know what the Bible is telling us through this? It can hold that story. It already was a witness to that complexity. It's inviting us in, and we want to push God out to the margins. We want to push him into yes and no, and God is saying in this story about Hagar, look, I'm living in the middle. I can navigate this. You're not alone. And so Sarai, in Genesis 16 it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. Wait a minute. So Hagar was a personal servant to Sarai, and Sarai was intent on having children of her own. She degraded Hagar even further and gave her to Abram, and hopefully Hagar would become president. Hagar had already lost her country, she lost her culture, and she was about to lose her body, not just physically, but pieces of her she didn't expect or want to give. If we embrace woman as Azer, then we are struck with how far Hagar is from belonging. Hagar is an ally, a defender, and a protector. That is who God made her to be. The trust for woman as thinker, inventor, builder, and leader has not only been discounted, but used against us. Abram participated in the oppression of women in an almost like thoughtless pattern. Does that mean that we let him off the hook? No. Does that mean that he isn't the father of our faith? No. We have to be able to sit in that for a moment. She was sex trafficked by her own mistress in order to fulfill the promise of a God she had never met. And this system leaves a legacy of slavery and abuse for us to contend with. We must contend with the genetic triggers, the environmental choices we have to change the narrative of oppression and suffering we witness. In verse 4, so Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. That's a little bit of fight. That's a little bit of saying, like, look, I'm still here. I'm a person. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show you who's wrong, you or me. So let's see what Abram says. Abram replied, look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. And I think that's hard too. I don't even have the answer to offer you, except that it's in lines of power. When we talk about lines of power, the blame and the shame gets so great that often, in order to defend ourselves against what we've done, we just keep doing it. I mean, the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside us, so she fled. Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she fled. And the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarai's servant, so he knew her. Where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai said. Where did God show up? He didn't meet Hagar in the temple. He didn't meet her through an Egyptian idol. He didn't meet her in the safety, like the physical safety of Abram's tent. Instead, he met Hagar in the depth of despair and desolation in the desert wilderness. This interrupts Hagar's culture and her imagination for her future. God interrupts the patterns of our cultures to meet us where we are. breaking down expectations of what rescue and healing are. He won't be confined by our customs or traditions. His business is the business of witnessing beauty, witnessing my beauty, my kids' beauty, and your beauty. God came to the desert, and we were created to be witnessed and seen. In John 15:4, it says, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me." To witness is not observing. It's not a glance. It's not the summary of my life story over a snapshot. And neither was Hagar's life with Abram. The verse in John 15:4 places the disciples as tenuous witnesses at the cusp of life and death. By translating the Greek, and I won't actually say the Greek word for you, I'm going to spell it. It's M-E-N-E-I-N. It's remaining rather than abiding. Hagar inspires an interhuman capacity to stand by each other in our sufferings, especially when they cannot be victoriously fixed. And not being seen, not being a person, moving through life invisible at the service of others, or with an undefined hope of heaven to repair the damage of my experience on earth, that's not being witnessed. It isn't satisfying to me anymore. My husband and I have been married 17 years, and we planned for many years to go on the missions field, and we went over to North Africa. So it took a lot of planning. We traveled, we got there, we joined a team, we had it all planned out, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got the whole plan out. We're going to learn language for 2 years, we're going to set up a business, we'll come back, raise funds. So we were out there, and I had my third baby there, Stella, and towards a year in, the government that we were living under, that country, started targeting extreme groups from Islam and Hindu and Christian groups and sending them out of the country. And so the leadership I was under was very scared. They got very scared. And so we quit language school right at that point, and we tried to start a business with almost no money. And guess what? It didn't happen. It wasn't going to happen. We just didn't have the funds for it. And as the time of that 2 years was up, our team leader told Luis and I, he's like, Luis, why is Danielle out so much? Why aren't you out more? And I remember feeling like, we don't belong here. We don't belong. Like, Luis, yeah, he's the man, but he loved to be home with the kids. And yeah, I was the woman, I loved being out. And so we didn't belong. We got home, found out I was pregnant with my fourth baby, and that team leader said, you know what, Luis and Danielle, you actually don't belong. You're not a good fit. You speak really good Spanish. And this country, we need people that speak French and Arabic, and you just don't fit. And I'm telling you, my world was rocked. I mean, we had sold we'd sold clothes, we'd sold furniture, sold cars, sold our house. Like, we came back, we had nothing. And I just said to God, that's it. You know my history. I came from, abuse as a child, and here I am trying to serve you. What are you doing? Why would you do this? And on top of it, I was pregnant. I was like, I can't believe it. I had been on birth control, we still got pregnant, so I was like, okay, so here, we're rolling. It's not like we're taking it back. So the time comes, Benjamin, I had so much stress and anxiety, and I've been telling God this whole time, look, I don't know where you are, I don't know who you are, but really, I don't feel like I belong to you, and you don't want me. And so I made a definite separation. Was I in church every Sunday? Mostly. Did you see me singing? Yeah. But was I connected? No. And about 8 weeks early, my son Benjamin was born, and they rushed him off to the NICU 45 minutes away from our house at a bigger hospital. And we were down there, and they released me from the hospital 3 days later. I came home, and I was just like, I can't believe it. What is this? I can't believe it, God. First Morocco, now we have nothing, and now my baby's in the hospital. I had a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old at home with me. And Luis was traveling about an hour to work every day. So every morning I would get up at 5:30 a.m. I'd drive down to the hospital with myself or a friend and see Benjamin for an hour and a half, and then I'd rush back and try to put the kids down for a nap and feed them lunch and everything. So I showed up a week in, and waiting for me is the nurse practitioner, the doctor and another support person. I'm like, oh no, I know this is not good. I know this is not good. And I sit down and I'm like, what's up? And they're like, well, just wait a minute, calm down. I'm like, you want me to be calm right now? What are you doing with my baby? I saw tubes in there. And they're like, just calm down. When we try to introduce feeding to babies that young, often it gets a hole or it can cause bacteria or irritation in their bowels. And that's what's happening to Benjamin. He has necrotizing enterocolitis. So I didn't know what that was before. I know all about it now. Neck. And so basically they found some red in his stool and he had this bacteria. And they're like, if we don't put him on antibiotics for 14 days, he can die. And I said, well, is he gonna die? And they're just like, you know what doctors do? They look at you, they turn their head. And then you're like, what's going on? And I started to cry and I realized they're not gonna answer me. They don't know. They don't know the answer to this. And so I was there by myself. Actually, I had my 2-year-old with me. I drove home. I don't even remember the drive home. Got home. Luis came home that night. I'm like, what is going on, Luis? Is Benjamin going to die? I'm like, tell me he's not going to die. And Ben's like, I don't know. Luis is like, I don't know. So a few days more pass, and in my head, I'm going, okay, God, I see you. What can I bargain with you for my son's life? What do I have? And I thought, well, the thing I could say is, I could say, God, I'm going to follow you the rest of my life and never doubt you in exchange for Benjamin's life. And then when I thought about that, I said, I don't want to. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I believe you're good. How can I make a promise to you and lie just for the sake of making a promise? I know I'm lying to God. So I said, I have no promise to make you. I have no bargain to offer. Came back home and I told Luis the story. And he said, Danielle, we have this one day. We have this one day. And I thought, okay. And something about Luis saying that, it wasn't a miraculous appearance of God to me in that moment. It wasn't the only thing that happened, but Luis told me we have one day, and I said, I believe that. I believe I have one day. And so every morning I'd get up and I'd see Benjamin for the remainder of that month that he was there. And I wouldn't tell myself I had 2 days or 3 days. Sometimes I would say, Danielle, you have 1 hour. You can believe 1 hour. And during that time period, as Hagar was witnessed in the desert, and she named God the God who sees me. And I think that story, I don't know how long she was there before she was able to say that, but for me it was a process. It was a time before I knew God could see me. Before I could say, God, you're seeing me, you're witnessing my story. You know I don't belong. And God was saying, it's okay, Danielle. You just can belong this day. You belong this hour. You give me what you can, and I'm going to expand. And so here I am. You know, Hagar was promised a full inheritance. The inheritance that was promised eventually to Isaac, Hagar received as her promise. And yeah, it's a slice of justice on earth. Did it repay Hagar? Did that promise of the inheritance and her descendants, did that repay Hagar for the life that she had led? For the slavery that she experienced? Or that she lived under? For her being sold for sex? To produce an heir? No, it doesn't replace that. But she did get a slice of justice here on earth. And in that slice of justice, we can have an imagination for what God is going to bring to us in heaven. The slices of justice we get on earth are just an imagination. They're a taste of the justice that's coming. And believe me, I'm a freedom fighter. And so this is not a message saying that we don't fight for all of the justice we can achieve here, or we want to achieve here on earth for marginalized and the people in our society that are suffering. No, we still have to fight. But sometimes we don't get everything at once. And so I want to encourage you, as you look at your story, to imagine where God wants to interrupt your story. And I imagine that Hagar stands among children and youth, women and men, calling out, God is in the desert places. I know. I was seen. I was not alone. And that when we're seduced by the pieces of life where we want to hide in the shame, we want to connect back to Jesus. I see anger and rage and grief and joy and sadness and lament as part of the solution, not as part of the problem. It's not rage at God that is the problem. It is living in the shadows and living under shame. And trauma provides a way for us to look at this intersection of rage and worship. There's an opportunity to look in the face of glory and see beauty, to reconnect our fragmented lives. An engagement of this truth enters heartache and anger, and it strangles shame, and it turns our face toward a living God. Thank you.